Okay, the second assignment I'm going to do, I'm going to get you started on it. It's Simplifying Radicals 2, and this is where we're going to be adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing, okay? So as you look through here, the way I have it split up is I have 10 questions, so we can kind of go ahead and draw a line here just to kind of help you. Okay, I have 10 questions that are adding and subtracting, and then I have 10 questions that are multiplying. Remember that the dot means multiply, okay? And then I have 10 questions that are dividing. And I'm going to do a few in each one just as a practice, okay? All right, now let's take a look at this first section. This is adding and subtracting. Now, like I told you guys in the lesson 5.0, when you are adding or subtracting, it's kind of like when you do fractions. They have to be like terms. They need to be the same. You can't, like when you have a common denominator, okay? It's the same situation. Or like when you're adding and when you're using equations, you look for like terms, okay? So that would be like what is under the square root sign. Okay, in this case, I have square root of 6, square root of 6. That is considered like terms. Okay, so if I have 2 square root 6 and I subtract 2 square root 6, obviously I'm going to have 0 left. I picked the hardest one to do. Okay, now take a look at number 2. Do not panic. This is just a negative. Okay, you're familiar with negative numbers, all right? So what I want to do is, I see I have square root 2 and then square root 8. Well, I can simplify that 8 into square root 4 times square root 2, okay? So I'm going to do that before I try to subtract, all right? Because I know that square root of 4 I can take out to give me a 2. All right, so now technically I'm looking at negative square root 2 minus 3 times 2 is 6 square root 2. Now I have the same. They are considered like terms. Now, if you want to change that to addition and make that a negative, you can, but this is like having a negative 1, okay? And this is just like when we have variables. Like we don't necessarily put negative 1x. We just say negative x. Same situation here with the radicals. So if I have a negative square root 2 and a negative 6 square root 2, that's going to be like a negative 6 and a negative 1, which would give me negative 7 square root 2. All right, I'm going to do one more, and then you'll do the rest of the adding and subtracting on your own. All right, when I take a look at this one, I see square root 3, square root 3. Those are considered like terms, okay? So when I look at this, I have a positive 2, and then I have a negative 3. So if I have a negative 3, or 2 minus 3, that's obviously going to give me a negative 1. But just like with variables, you're not going to put negative 1 square root 3. You would just put negative square root 3. You don't put a 1 there, just like when we have a variable. All right, now let's skip down a little bit here to multiplication. Now the rule for multiplication is what is outside the sign gets multiplied, and what is inside the sign gets multiplied, okay? So I have nothing outside, so I'm just looking at what's inside, which is 20 times 20, and that's going to equal 400. Then you need to take a look at simplifying like we did in the other assignment. So I can see if I can get the square root of 400, and I can. It is 20. Now, if I couldn't, then I would go to the factors and simplify it that way, just exactly like we did in simplifying radicals number 1. All right, let's take a look at number 12. I have a 2 and a negative 5 outside the sign. That's going to give me negative 10 square root 3 times 2 is 6. Now, once you multiply, you just need to look at that carefully right here, what's inside the sign, and ask yourself, is there any way that I can simplify that further? Is there anything that is a perfect square that I can pull outside of that sign? And there isn't, so that would be my final answer. Okay, I'll do one more with you, number 13. Okay, so now I have this outside the sign, that's like a -1, okay? And then this would be times 2, so that's going to equal -2 square root 6 times 8 is 48. Now, that's a pretty big number, so you should kind of automatically think, okay, I'm sure I can simplify that. Okay, so then you can't do the square root of 48. You get a decimal, so you know you're going to need to break that down, okay? And when you look at your factors, you can do 16 times 3, okay? You can do 4 times 12. Yes, you can, because, you know, obviously the square root of 4 is 2. But then you'll have to do another step. So the higher the number that's a perfect square that you can get as a factor, the better off you are, okay? Because then I have this outside the sign. Now I'm going to have 4 outside of the sign, okay? And then I have 3. There's nothing I can do with that. So then I take 4 times -2. That's going to give me -8 square root 3. Now, I don't mind on your paper if you go to the side, if you put stuff up and down. If you would, though, just box or circle your answer for me, because I know people are going to kind of have their own way of showing their work, and that's fine, okay? Just take your time on this. That's why I didn't give you very many questions. That's why I'm not doing a lesson in a paper every single day, because this just needs to take your time. You need to go slow on these, okay, so you don't get tripped up. All right, let's take a look at the other side now, is division. So let me get to 21 here. Now, with division, the way you handle these is you're going to multiply, just like we did in our notes. You're going to multiply times whatever is inside of that radical sign, okay? And you'll multiply your numerator and your denominator by that, because basically what you're trying to do is get that outside the sign, okay? So then you will go straight across here, and just like the rule with multiplying, 3 will be by itself, and then you'll multiply 15 times 16, and you get 240 over. The 2 would come on across, and the square root, 16 times 16 is 256. Now, you can just do the square root of 256. However, that's going to leave a very large number there that you're still going to need to simplify, okay? So what you need to try to do is, and you'll have to pull up, go to y equals for 240 divided by x, and then do y equals 256 divided by x, and look at your factors, because you're going to need to find the largest number that you can to divide both of those by, okay? Sometimes it's a perfect square and sometimes it's not, but the whole point is that you know that that's not simplified, okay? You know that you can whittle that down quite a bit, okay? And when you look at your multiplication facts, okay, the largest number that you can divide both of these by is actually 16, okay? So you're going to, that right there, you're going to divide by 16, and that's going to give you 3 square root 15 over, and then this you would also do, and you would get 2 square root 16. I just divided both of these by 16, okay? Now, what you're left with is square root of 15. Can you do anything to that to simplify? And the answer to that is no, because 1 times 15 or 3 times 5, none of those are perfect squares, but this one is, so you can get that 4 out of there, okay? So that makes your final answer 3 square root 15 over 2 times 4 is 8. And I know I know that is a lot. Now, I want to go ahead and show you one thing that I had mentioned to you guys. Sometimes with division there could be a shortcut, and you might be thinking, why in the world would you show me all of this when you're about to show me a shortcut? Well, that's because I'm hoping that you guys will learn that sometimes there's more than one way to work a problem, and you can either work it out and then simplify, or sometimes you can actually simplify before you ever get started, okay? And that would be like this. You know, the whole point of division is so you don't have a square root symbol in the bottom, okay? Because that was one of our helpful hints on the very front of 5.0, is that you can't have a square root in your denominator. That's why you multiply by it, because you're trying to get rid of it. Okay, well, if I did this from the start and did the square root of 16 is 4, and I took that out, that automatically gives me 3 square root 15 over 8, which is my answer. Okay, so the reason I'm telling you this is that some of you may need to work it out slowly, step by step. Others of you might pick up right off the bat that you could simplify from the start, okay? And the reason I'm telling you that, let me get my notes here, is because I want to show you what we talked about in our notes yesterday. And I told you I wasn't going to talk about it because I didn't want to confuse you. But this is what that means, okay? Is when it says, notice we do not really divide radicals, but get them out of the denominator of a fraction. And then it says another way to divide radicals is to simplify the fraction before you rationalize the denominator, okay? So this is rationalizing the denominator. So sometimes you can simplify it before you ever begin. Just like I've said all along, and you'll hear me say that a million times more, please go slow, okay? Go slow. All right, look at number 22. You have square root of 5 over square root of 80. Now this one, again, you could go ahead and multiply by square root of 80, square root of 80, but this can actually be simplified before you ever begin, and that will cut short and especially make your numbers a lot smaller, okay? When you pull up your factors of 80, 5 times 16 is 80. So that means 5 divided by 5 is 1, and 80 divided by 5 is 16. So now what you're really dealing with is square root of 1 over 3 square root of 16. Now, square root of 1 is 1, okay? And then square root of 16, you can get that out of there because the square root of 16 is 4, okay? And then multiply 4 times 3 is 12. So on this one, you could simplify it before you ever got started. Now, if you didn't catch that on right away, you could still go ahead and go through the steps of multiplying by square root of 80. You would have eventually gotten here. But if you can take care of it and rationalize that first, it just makes it a little bit easier, okay? I'm going to do one more with you because I know division is a little difficult. Okay, so when you take a look at this, you have 5 square root of 5 over square root 4. Okay, I'm going to multiply by square root of 4. And some of you might be saying, hold on here, because I think I can actually do square root of 4 is going to give you 2. And you're exactly right. So, do you want to go that route, or do you want to do this part? I'm just going to do both just so I can show you. And I've told you that from the start. A lot of times in geometry, there's more than one way to get your answer. Okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and work this out. That would give you 5 square root 20 over square root of 4 times square root of 4 is square root of 16. Okay? So now you have this, which will simplify to 4, the whole number 4, okay? You have the 5 outside of here. Then 20, you know you can break that down into square root of 4 times square root of 5. So that's going to give you square root of 4 can come out as 2. And now you're just left with 5. So, and this is why I'm telling you to go slow, because all these markings here, you got to go slow. So 2 times 5 is 10, square root 5 over 4. Now, what you got to be careful of is, and I've told you guys anytime you look at what you have outside the sign, 10 and 4 can be simplified, okay? Because you can divide both of these by 2, and that's going to give you 5 square root 5 over 2. And that would be, technically, that is your final answer. Now, let's say that you take care of it before you ever begin, like this, and you know square root of 4 is 2. Well, looky there. You have 5 square root 5 over 2. So you still come up with the same answer. You can either take care of it at the beginning, or you go through the steps and then you finalize it at the end. I personally think this is easier, but the reason I'm showing you this is because if you mess up and you don't catch it, you're not dumb, okay? This takes a lot of steps. Just take your time. But my point is that you can still get to the answer by following the steps and simplifying as you go, and you'll still get the same answer, okay? Just go slow on this, you guys. I'm going to do one more with you just because I know it is a little iffy, okay? You have 2 square root 15 and 5 square root 3. All right, so let's see if we can simplify it before we ever begin. 2 and a 5 I can't do anything with. However, 3 and 15 I can, because 3 will go into 15. So think about fractions as you're simplifying. If you need to pull up y equals 15 divided by x, go ahead. That's the bad thing about having calculators, is you guys lose track of your multiplication facts, okay? But you can simplify this. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 15 divided by 3 is 5, okay? So ultimately, you have 2 square root 5 over 5 square root 1. You can't have square root 1 because 1 times 1 is 1. So technically, 1 comes out, okay? So that makes your final answer 2 square root 5 over 5 times 1 is 5. Now, don't think, oh, I can simplify that. No, because 5 is outside the sign. The numbers outside the sign go together, and then the numbers inside the sign go together when you're simplifying, okay? Or when you're thinking about it as a fraction. And in this case, that's why those go together. The 2 and the 5 go together, okay? So don't confuse those. You have to keep it with what's outside the sign and what's inside the sign. But that would be your final answer. All right, now you finish up the rest of those on your own and go slow. Please go slow.